I'm proud to announce the redesign and reimagining of DealBook, the multi-platform news group one founded at the New York Times in 2001. More on that below. But first, we held our annual DealBook conference on Thursday, which featured a lineup of some of the biggest newsmakers in business and policy. Here is what stood out. Andrew Ross Sorkin, AT&T's chief executive, Randall L. Stevenson, said that selling CNN to push through his company's acquisition of Time Warner has not been and never will be on the table. "I have never offered to sell CNN," he said repeatedly. "There is absolutely no intention that we would ever sell CNN. The culture went wrong, the governance went wrong, the board went in a very bad direction. I think winning gives some excuses for bad behavior," said Dara Khosrowshahi, speaking publicly for the first time since he became Uber's chief executive in August. His aim now to move Uber past the series of scandals that has shaken the company to its core. Melody Hobson, the president of Ariel Investments, noted the corporate environment remains overwhelmingly white and male. "I've been asking myself one question over and over again," she said. "Where is the corporate kaepernick?" She added. "Who else will be willing to use the high-profile position to call attention to inequality? Is the country ready for another billionaire reality TV star to be president?" Mark Cuban said that he was considering a presidential run. AT&T's CEO selling CNN makes no sense. Randall L. Stevenson, AT&T's chief executive, said that selling CNN to push through his company's pending $85.4 billion acquisition of Time Warner has not been and never will be on the table. "I have never offered to sell CNN," he said repeatedly. "There is absolutely no intention that we would ever sell CNN," he added. "I have never been told that the price of getting the deal done is selling the cable news channel." The New York Times reported on Wednesday that the options that had been asked to weigh were selling the Turner Broadcasting cable unit, which includes CNN, or DirecTV. Speaking one day after tensions over AT&T's negotiations with the Justice Department spilled into the open, Mr. Stevenson said that selling the news network doesn't make sense in the context of what we're trying to accomplish by buying Time Warner. Stevenson is going on the offensive. "He's mad about the DOJ leaks. Selling CNN makes no sense." DealBook _ Mike Isaac, November 9, 2017. If completed, the deal with Time Warner, the owner of HBO, Warner Brothers and CNN, would transform it into a colossus capable of both producing content and distributing it to millions of people via its wireless and satellite services. "This is a classic vertical merger," Mr. Stevenson said. "There are no overlaps of competition. There are no competitors being taken out of the competition. There hasn't been one of these challenged in the courts and defeated in 40 years. Tiffany Hsu is head of Facebook's global policy and counterterrorism. Musbica deals with the company's thorniest questions. Mike Cohen for the New York Times. There is no quick fix for fake news on Facebook. Monica Bickett has an impossible job, and it's only going to get harder. As head of Facebook's global policy and counterterrorism, Musbica deals with the company's thorniest questions, like what should and should not be allowed on Facebook. We don't want false news on Facebook, Musbica said. People want to connect with real, authentic information. She noted Facebook is taking steps to work with more than 2,600 publishers to deal with some of the issues, and the company's product teams are continuously making tweaks to the system to better inform members of the public whether a story is potentially unreliable. But for Facebook, which relies on a combination of humans and artificial intelligence to review content, the work is nowhere near finished. As we've seen in congressional hearings last week, the company still has a long way to go. How do we get there? I don't think there's a silver bullet, Musbica said. Mike Isaac, Uber 2.0. Dara Khosrowshahi wants to make something clear. The new Uber will not look like the company he inherited. Speaking publicly for the first time since he became Uber's chief executive in August, Mr. Khosrowshahi painted a rosier vision of the future of his company. His aim to escape from the shadow cast over the ride-hailing giant after a series of scandals shook the company to its core and resulted in the eventual ousting of former chief executive and co-founder Travis Kalanick. "The culture went wrong, the governance went wrong, the board went in a very bad direction," Mr. Khosrowshahi said in conversation with Andrew Ross Sorkin. "I think winning gives some excuses for bad behavior. Now, Mr. Khosrowshahi is trying to put his own imprimatur on the company and what he calls Uber 2.0. perhaps most important, he has embarked on an apology tour of sorts in cities and countries around the world, trying to repair the damage done by Mr. Kaepernick and his contentious, bare-knuckled approach to dealing with regulators in new markets. "I've got to put my stamp on the company," he said. "We're on our way, Mike Isaac." Where is the corporate Kaepernick? Melody Hobson, the president of Ariel Investments, a Chicago investment firm, noted the corporate environment remains overwhelmingly white and male. "I've been asking myself one question over and over again," she said. Where is the corporate Kaepernick? Kaepernick, the former quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, began kneeling during the national anthem at games to protest racial inequality last year, attracting national attention. He is now a free agent. "I've never met Colin Kaepernick, but I will tell you he's a hero of mine," Ms. Hobson said. "Who else will be willing to use the high-profile position to call attention to inequality? Kenneth I. Cheno, for one, has tried." Kenneth the First Cheno, Center, and Lawrence D. Fink of BlackRock, right, speaking on Thursday. Mike Cohen for the New York Times. Mr. Cheno will retire next year after a long run as the chief executive of American Express. When he assumed the position in 2001, he was only the third black person ever to lead a Fortune 500 company. When he retires, 3 will remain. He pointed out the wrong way to think about diversity. "Don't deny that I'm African American," Mr. Cheno said. "Accept me for who I am. Engage with me, but don't deny my heritage, because it's important. Because we don't have enough honest discussions about race in this country." JC14 Millard Drexler, the chairman of J.Crew, said he chose not to sell his company's clothing on Amazon, although he said he had enormous respect for the company. Mike Cohen for the New York Times. There is a growing convergence of brick-and-mortar retailing. Now, with commercial rents still stubbornly high, retail is seamless between bricks and mortar, Millard Drexler, chairman of J.Crew Group, said Thursday. "Everything was moving in this direction, but I don't think anyone was prepared," he said, reaching repeatedly into his pocket for his smartphone to demonstrate the ease of comparing prices. "I wasn't prepared for the speed with which this was going to happen," Mr. Drexler said. J.Crew had approached Amazon about whether the e-commerce giant was interested in buying the brick-and-mortar chain. Nothing came of the talks, and Mr. Drexler said he chose not to sell J.Crew clothing on Amazon. "They own the customer," he said. "And I'd be afraid they'd take every bestseller and put it into the private label collection." Tiffany HSU Twitter and Square juggling 2 very different companies. It is strange to look back on the past few years and consider the trajectories of Twitter and Square, the 2 companies co-founded and run by Jack Dorsey. For many, Square was all but dead on arrival at the time of its 2015 initial public offering, while Twitter was being questioned as an acquisition target by Salesforce, Disney or Google. But things are different now. Square's stock has been surging, and Twitter has been under fire for the role that bots and fake accounts played in the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. This week, Twitter was met with outrage for verifying the account of the white supremacist. And last week, a rogue employee at Twitter temporarily took down President Trump's Twitter account on the employee's last day at work. Mr. Dorsey said Thursday that the deletion of the account should never have been possible. He went to say that things are changing, and that starts with more transparency around the company's rules and terms of service. "We're working to be more transparent. I would give us a high grade at the moment," he said. "We're trying to learn as quickly as possible." Mike Isaac Howard Schultz of Starbucks. "The country," he said, "is in great need of a more compassionate government and a more compassionate society." Mike Cohen for the New York Times. Starbucks Schultz tax plan is fool's gold. Howard Schultz, the executive chairman of Starbucks, lashed out at the proposed tax code overhauls being promoted by Republicans. "When so many people are living paycheck to paycheck, corporate America does not need a tax cut," he said. "This is not tax reform. This is a tax cut. This is fool's gold." Instead, Mr. Schultz said the government should focus on investing in initiatives like education and better health care. David Gell's Laurene Powell Jobs, the founder and president of Emerson Collective, speaking on Thursday. Mike Cohen for the New York Times. Becoming a potent force in philanthropy. Laurene Powell Jobs, the founder of Emerson Collective and the widow of the Apple co-founder Steve Jobs, is emerging as a potent force in philanthropy. On education, Ms. Powell-Jobs said the sorry state of public education had motivated her to pursue a number of initiatives aimed at improving opportunities for students and giving them more resources. At most, 50% of students who were graduating high school prepared for college or a career, she said. We're not even close to where we need to be on immigration. Ms. Powell-Jobs discussed the issue with President Trump earlier this year and took out advertisements supporting the DREAM Act, legislation intended to shield young immigrants who brought here illegally from deportation. We believe strongly that Congress needs to pass the DREAM Act or something akin to it, she said. We want to put some pressure on people who have to take this vote. David Girl's innovation is tied to American manufacturing, Brian Krzanich, Intel's chief executive said. Mike Cohen for the New York Times, Intel CEO, keeping manufacturing in the U.S. is about more than jobs. America needs manufacturing, said Brian Krzanich, Intel's chief executive. And, for Mr. Krzanich, who was on the president's Manufacturing Advisory Council before it disbanded in August, keeping manufacturing in America is about more than jobs. Without it, the nation risks losing its edge on research and development, too. R&D and manufacturing are often tied together, and if we lose manufacturing, I think we really risk losing R&D next, he said. Niraj Chokshi is the country ready for another billionaire reality TV star to be president? Maybe, said Mark Cuban. Mr. Cuban said that he was considering a presidential run, repeating an assertion he has made before. People are looking for an independent voice, a real independent voice, that at least has an inkling of what they're talking about, he said. But he added, I've had 3 kids. What caring, loving parent would put an 8, an 11 and a 14-year-old child through this MR? Cuban also offered thoughts on how he might approach tax regulation. The corporate tax rate should be lower, somewhere around 25%, but not too low, Mr. Cuban said. There are so many incentives to do business in America that there's no reason to excessively cut rates. Niraj Chokshi, the new DealBook is your must-read. Over the past several years, business has become inextricably linked with policy, in Washington, in Brussels, in Beijing, like never before. That's why we're reimagining DealBook with a renewed focus on the intersection of these cross-currents, as well as a broader frame on the world of business to include technology, innovation, philanthropy and corporate governance. DealBook will aim to identify, curate and prioritize the most critical information, providing a trusted one-stop shop for the business and policy developments that matter. You'll also be able to read the live, updated DealBook report here. And yes, we're still covering the world of deals as much as ever before. You may have noticed we've been subtly experimenting with this evolution in coverage over the past couple of months. Many of you, some 300,000 plus subscribers to our newsletter alone, have been with us since the very beginning. Thank you. We would love to hear your feedback. And if you like what you see, we'd be grateful if you'd recommend us to a friend or co-worker. Thanks for your support. Each weekday, DealBook reporters in New York and London offer commentary and analysis on the day's the most important business and policy news. Want this in your own email inbox? Here's the sign-up. You can find live updates of DealBook coverage throughout the day at nytimes.com. DealBook. Follow Andrew Ross Sorkin at Andrew Sorkin, Michael J. Delamerce at M_Delamerce and Amy Sang at Amiette Sang on Twitter. Finally, we would love to hear your feedback as we experiment with the writing, format and design of this briefing. Please email thoughts and suggestions to bizday@nytimes.com.